Hey there, my name's Mark. I guess you could say I've been through a lot, stuff that most people only read about in books or see in movies. But I'm here to tell you it's real. I'm not writing this story to ask for sympathy or pity. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand the journey. The road I walked down wasn't easy, but it shaped who I am today. I lost my parents when I was just a kid, an age where most of us are still holding onto their hands, feeling safe in their warmth. But that was all ripped away. No warning. No preparation. One moment, I was laughing with them, and the next, they were gone. Just like that. I don't remember much about those early days, those first few months after everything went down. But what I do remember is the feeling of being alone. Completely alone. At first, I stayed with a relative, but it was clear they had their own lives to live. I was just another mouth to feed, a reminder of tragedy they didn't want to deal with. The situation got worse, and before I knew it, I found myself out on the street. If you've never been homeless, it's hard to explain how quickly it can crush you. You think you'll just stay outside for a night, maybe two. But it starts to stretch on, days turn into weeks, and before you know it, survival becomes your only focus. For a while, I did what I had to do, begged. Every day. It wasn't dignified, but it was survival. You don't really have the luxury of pride when you're hungry and freezing. I think the hardest part wasn't the cold or the hunger, it was the shame. That gnawing feeling like I had failed the world. Like I was invisible. It was like I had this big neon sign above my head that said, "I'm not good enough." That's what I saw in people's eyes when they looked at me: disgust, pity, fear. But you learn. I learned fast that people won't give you much if they don't think you have anything to offer. So, I stopped begging as much. Instead, I started looking for ways to get by on my own. I found little odd jobs here and there, washing cars, cleaning gutters, anything to make a little cash, but I knew I had to do something more. I couldn't live like this forever. I started thinking about the world around me, about the people I saw with money. How did they get it? What did they know that I didn't? And I realized something: this world, the one I was fighting to survive in, it was changing fast. And I needed to change with it. One day, I saw a guy on the street using a phone, talking to someone. I couldn't help but stare. It wasn't just the phone, it was the way he was talking. He was confident. Like he was in control. I had no idea how a guy like him ended up on my street, but it was a wake-up call for me. I thought, if I had something like that, maybe I could change my situation. So, I did what I had to do. I sold the few things I had, scraped together whatever I could, and I bought a phone. It wasn't much. A basic model, barely enough to make calls. But to me, it was a key. It opened up a world of possibilities. I started learning everything I could about the internet, how it worked, how people were making money online. One thing led to another, and I realized there was more to it than just surfing the web. There was business. Real business. Things like crypto, dropshipping, e-commerce, terms I didn't even know a year ago. But they were out there, making people millions. And if they could do it, why couldn't I? But getting into this world wasn't easy. The first thing I learned was that you need money to make money. So, I got more creative. I started using my phone to research ways to make small investments. It wasn't much at first, just $10 here and there. But I used every dollar I could spare, every scrap of hope I had, to build up something bigger. Eventually, I realized that I needed more than just the phone. I needed a place where I could really get things moving. A place where I could get access to the internet without depending on public Wi-Fi. I needed something to call my own. So, I took another leap. I saved up enough to rent a small café. It wasn't much, but it had a steady flow of people and a place for me to set up shop. I started small. At first, it was just about having a place to think, a place to focus. But it soon became my headquarters. The cafe wasn't profitable at first, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the internet connection. What mattered was that I could now take everything I had learned and turn it into something real. Every spare minute, I spent learning about e-commerce, how to set up an online store, how to find products to sell. I started looking into dropshipping, figuring out how to sell without holding inventory. Crypto? I started dabbling in that, too, learning how to buy and trade small amounts. I was learning fast. And even though it wasn't easy, I knew this was my shot. The cafe became more than just a cafe, it became a launching pad for everything I was about to do, but I'm not going to lie to you. It wasn't easy. There were days I barely made enough to pay the rent. There were days when I doubted myself, when I thought I'd never make it. But through every setback, I learned. I made mistakes, but I used those mistakes to push forward, and that's the thing I want you to understand: this journey wasn't smooth. It wasn't clean. It was messy, painful, and full of failures. But each failure taught me something. And slowly but surely, I started seeing results. Small results, but results nonetheless. You see, when you're on the bottom, you have to be smart. You can't afford to waste time. You have to take every opportunity, no matter how small, and turn it into something. And that's exactly what I did, but this is just the beginning. The real test was yet to come. Alright, so now I'm going to take you deeper into the grind, because that's where things started getting real. The first few months after opening the cafe weren't pretty. It was a mess of trial and error, pushing my limits, and learning from every failure. But when you're in the trenches, you don't have the luxury of giving up. You just keep going, even when you can't see the way forward. When I first got the cafe, I didn't exactly know how to run a business. Sure, I'd read a few things online, but it's different when you're actually in it. You can study all you want, but there's no substitute for real-world experience. And that's where I made my first big mistake. I underestimated how much work it would take just to keep the doors open. I'd barely break even some days. Other days, I barely had enough to buy a meal, but there was a silver lining. The cafe became my foundation. It was a steady place, a stable source of income, even if it wasn't much. I wasn't expecting it to make me rich, but I needed it. I needed that small win, that spark that would eventually lead to a bigger fire. I remember the first time I made a sale online. It was small, barely enough to cover the cost of a coffee, but it was something. I had set up a dropshipping store, just selling simple stuff, gadgets, small electronics. Things I knew people wanted, things I could source for cheap and sell at a decent markup. At first, it felt like a game. Every time I got a sale notification, I'd get this rush of excitement. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. I wasn't getting rich overnight, but I was learning. I learned about pricing, marketing, customer service, and the nuances of running a successful online store. I watched videos, read blogs, and consumed everything I could to learn the tricks of the trade. But it wasn't just about learning from others, I had to experiment, too. I tried running ads on social media, targeting specific groups of people who might be interested in my products. I learned quickly that advertising isn't as simple as it sounds. You have to know your audience, know what drives them, what they care about. It's about psychology, not just selling. By this time, I had my eyes on a bigger prize. I had learned enough about crypto to feel confident making small investments. It was a risk, but one I was willing to take. I started putting money into Bitcoin and Ethereum. Not a lot, just a few $100s at first, but it was a start. I was starting to understand how the market worked, how the value of coins could swing wildly in a matter of hours. It was thrilling, terrifying, and exciting all at once, but here's the thing about crypto: it's not for the faint of heart. The volatility is insane. 1 minute, you're up by 10%, the next, you're down by 15%. It's a roller coaster, and if you're not careful, it'll spit you out. And there were days when I thought I'd made a huge mistake. Days when I watched my portfolio take a dive and felt the panic set in. But then I remembered why I started. I wanted to build something, not just survive, and that's when everything clicked. One day, I made a trade that changed everything. I had been following a particular altcoin for weeks. It was a newer coin, not much hype, but I'd done my research, and I believed in its potential. I invested a couple $100 and waited. 2 weeks later, it shot up by 400%. My heart was pounding when I saw the numbers. I had just made a small fortune, but here's the thing, they don't tell you about the highs. The highs are great, sure, but they come with their own problems. When you make money fast, it's easy to get cocky. I could have cashed out then and there and walked away with a solid profit, but no. I wanted more. I thought I had the formula figured out. So, I pushed harder, that was my second mistake. I got greedy. I invested everything I had in other coins, hoping for another big win. But things didn't go as planned. The market tanked, and my gains vanished faster than they came. One moment I was on top of the world, and the next, I was back to square one. It was crushing. You have no idea how much it stings to go from the highest high to the lowest low in the blink of an eye. But it's part of the game. The world of crypto isn't for the faint of heart, and it wasn't about to break me. I didn't stop there. I dusted myself off and got back to work, but I needed a change in approach. I realized I needed to build something that was sustainable, something that didn't depend on the whims of the market. So, I turned back to e-commerce. I started refining my dropshipping business, focusing on higher ticket items, things like electronics, fitness gear, anything that had a higher margin. I set up a better website, optimized my ads, and started treating my online store like a real business, not just a side hustle, and it worked. The sales started rolling in. Slowly at first, then more consistently. I was making a few $100s a day, sometimes more. It wasn't the millions I dreamed of, but it was something I could build on. I started reinvesting my profits into ads, upgrading my inventory, and fine-tuning my marketing. I learned to analyze data, figure out what products were selling, and which ones weren't worth the investment. By this time, the cafe was running on autopilot. I'd hired a few part-time employees to manage the day-to-day operations while I focused on growing my online businesses. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, but let me tell you, that success didn't come easy. There were still setbacks, days when nothing seemed to go right, and times when I doubted myself. But the difference now was that I had a foundation. I had a clear vision, and I had learned to trust the process. It wasn't about overnight success, it was about consistent, steady progress, and this is where I am now, looking back on everything I've been through. It hasn't been an easy journey, but it's been worth it. I didn't just escape the streets, I built a future for myself. A future that's mine to control, but there's still more to come. The world of business, crypto, and e-commerce never stops evolving. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. Alright, so by this point, I'd gotten a taste of success. The cafe was running smoothly, the dropshipping was steady, and crypto was slowly starting to grow again after my rough patch. I was finally in a position where I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck anymore. But I knew something had to change. I wasn't content with good enough, I wanted more. I wanted to push myself to the next level, and I had no idea how exactly, but I knew I needed to think bigger. This is where the game truly began to change for me. The first thing I did was take a hard look at my business model. I had been working around the clock, trying to juggle multiple ventures, but I wasn't scaling the way I should have been. I was running a cafe, I was hustling with my dropshipping store, and I had crypto investments, but I was only scratching the surface of what I could actually achieve. My energy was divided too thin, and I wasn't giving each project the focus it needed. I needed to consolidate. I needed a strategy to not only manage my existing businesses better but to expand intelligently. And I needed a system that would generate passive income so I could work less but earn more. Here's where I made the decision that would set me on the path to truly breaking through. I decided to focus solely on e-commerce, specifically in niche markets. I could feel that dropshipping wasn't the long-term answer. Sure, I was making money, but the margins were thin, and the competition was fierce. I needed something more stable, more scalable. So, I took a big risk. I reinvested every penny I had into creating my own brand. Instead of dropshipping random products, I decided to design and source my own line of custom products. I chose a niche that I knew had massive potential: fitness. With the rise of home workouts, gym gear, and supplements, I knew there was an audience for quality, unique products. I also tapped into an emerging trend: eco-friendly products. It wasn't just about fitness anymore, it was about offering sustainable options that catered to a conscious, health-focused audience. Now, creating your own brand from scratch is no easy feat. I didn't have much capital to work with, so I had to be extremely strategic. The first step was market research. I spent weeks combing through data, reading consumer behavior reports, and figuring out exactly what my potential customers were looking for. I knew I couldn't compete with the big players like Amazon and Nike, but what I could do was offer something they didn't: personalization, attention to detail, and a connection to my audience. I started small. I created a website using Shopify, which I knew like the back of my hand by now, set up social media accounts, and began promoting my products through organic traffic. I didn't spend a single dime on ads at first. Instead, I focused on building a community, using Instagram and YouTube to share workout tips, fitness motivation, and eco-conscious living. I wasn't just selling products, I was creating a brand, a lifestyle that people could get behind. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I hit a major roadblock early on. After I launched my first product line, fitness mats made from sustainable materials, I ran into a major supplier issue. The quality of the mats wasn't up to my standards, and customers started complaining. I had a handful of returns, which hurt both my reputation and my wallet. That moment was devastating. I thought about throwing in the towel and going back to the drawing board. But I didn't. I realized this was just another challenge to overcome. So, I switched suppliers and spent the next month testing different manufacturers to ensure I was getting the best quality possible. I also started offering a satisfaction guarantee, which not only helped build trust with my customers but also pushed me to ensure I was only selling the best products. Once I got the product right, it was time to scale. I didn't waste any time. I invested heavily in paid ads, Facebook and Instagram ads targeting the fitness community and eco-conscious consumers. And let me tell you, once I started hitting the right audience, the sales came flooding in. I was finally able to scale my business, and the returns started to show. But here's the real turning point: I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building an empire. With the income from my brand, I expanded my operations. I hired a small team to help with customer service, logistics, and marketing. I even partnered with a few influencers in the fitness space, sending them free products in exchange for reviews and shoutouts. It wasn't long before I started to see my brand grow exponentially. The profits were coming in, but more importantly, my brand was starting to stand out in a crowded market. I realized the power of personal branding during this phase. I didn't just want people to buy my products, I wanted them to buy into who I was. I started sharing my story, showing my audience that I wasn't just another business owner, I was someone who had fought through adversity, someone who had come from nothing and built something. I was selling the idea that with hard work, determination, and the right mindset, anyone could turn their life around. It wasn't just about fitness gear anymore, it was about hope, empowerment, and change, and that's when I finally hit my stride. I'd been in business for a few years at this point, but this was the moment when everything fell into place. I had a sustainable income, I was scaling up, and I had a community that was invested in my story. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, but it didn't stop there. I knew I had to keep evolving, keep pushing myself to think bigger. With the success of my fitness brand, I ventured into other niches, expanding my business model even further. I invested more in crypto, I started dabbling in real estate, and I even created an online course to teach others how to start their own e-commerce businesses. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was back then. The kid who was begging on the streets, the one who had no idea where his next meal was coming from, that guy is gone. In his place is someone who understands business, who understands what it takes to succeed. And it all came down to those moments when I felt like giving up, but I didn't. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the best decision of my life. Now, I'm not just financially free. I'm living proof that anyone, no matter where they come from, can make it. And the best part? This is just the beginning. The world is changing fast, and I'm going to make sure I'm ready for whatever comes next.